Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today is the second day in watercolor month, July 2021, and I'm gonna work with the Artistro Watercolor Paint Set. It's called Artistro 48 colors, this particular set, and it's one of those novelty palette that, you know, it was like the container that really caught my eye. It came with this tiny block of 10 sheet of loose watercolor papers, and what sold me was this tin blocks. I mean, it is so yummy. The colors is teal and it's a metal box, so in case that you take out what's inside of it and put magnets on the back of your pans, you will have a do-it-yourself watercolor box where you can customize it with your own colors. And as you can see, these are full pans. You can actually fit 2 full pans on top of each other, and with luck, maybe if you do like this you can actually have a nice row of paint and then room for a brush. But let me open it up. Comes with a metal clasp that's like really sturdy. Everything in this box is like super sturdy. Look at the hinges on the back. It's one of those hinges you would expect to watch on tiny doors or something. So you open it up and then it arrives with a water brush pen, a pencil, and this is a real life size pencil. It's not like it's a miniature pencil or anything. So you can kind of figure out just by looking at the pencil that when this box is empty and you take out all the plastic, you can utilize it to a pencil pen case, because it's got like a nice width to it. Then it arrives with this tiny detail brush, which is kind of okay. It's like not super best, but it does the job. And then it has this sponge, and if I flip the sponge around, it looks more neat. And then an eraser, and the eraser is plastic, so that's the kind of eraser watercolorists like to use, because it crumples less and destroys the paper less than other kinds of erasers. And then there are 48 watercolors, where some of them are really special because we got like 4 neon colors, and then we got 4 shimmery colors. And the new kind of thing in this is that it got like this green ochre and a gray ochre, and then a paint gray and a black. But it's very rare that you see these green and gray shaded ochres. Okay, so I try and paint with this, and the first thing I noticed was that I really enjoyed working with the water brush. It feeds itself with water in a nice tempo, so you kind of, you know, you don't get annoyed when you use it, you know what I mean? Like it's a good watercolor brush. And then you can also do brush letters with it. I'm not a brush letter kind of person. Okay, before I just waste the whole sheet, why don't I take some of the small sheet? But look how it just really holds up the pigment well. I'm gonna let it dry itself empty, or, you know, continue until it totally dries out. But look how much you can write with one dip. So I don't know, I'm not used to do brush lettering, but I must say that I find it so much easier to do with this water brush for some reason, and even come in with a new shade or a new color. it's just a surprise, I would say, that I really like the content of the metal case, because I was actually expecting a crappy pencil, a crappy water brush, and a bad eraser, because I think I paid what is about like $18 for this whole set. So suddenly when I think about what value you get for your money, like 10 sheets of paper, this box, this good things like a pencil with it, and they're kind of trying to make it look like the Faber-Castell pencil, you know, that triangle one that won't roll off your table. I mean, I really think that you get a lot for your money. So I've, of course, painted with it. Let me show you some of my paintings. The first thing that I painted was in this Arteza book, 8x8. And I did use the white to make these pages where, and I kind of discovered something. There's something about the white. First I did this one, and I really, it caught my eyes, these 3 pans right here, because they're like really bright. So I started to put in the white, and then I just noticed that something happened when I had a wet wash doing it with the white. I couldn't really tell what it was. So of course I had to work a little bit more with doing water with white in it. So here I'm adding even more white, and I get this really unfamiliar structure to it. I'm not used to paint acting this way. Like, look, it almost looks like it's granulating. So that was like really interesting for me to experience. I've tried a lot of brands of watercolors, but I have to say that there's something different going on with this set. I think I know what it is. You see, watercolor consists of pigment, and in this case, when it's like very inexpensive to buy it, it must also contain some sort of a filler to make the pigment last longer in each batch. And then of course there is a binder, and without the binder you will like be able to smear off the pigments like a powder, but none of these pans is contaminating your finger when you touch them. So the binder in them must be solid, right? Usually it's like gum arabic, or in other brands it can be like honey, and in the core it's something totally different. But I'm not sure what this is. This is, I think, a chemical production. I'm not so sure if it got a lot to do with pigments, but there was something really special about this set that I have never encountered in any of the other watercolor brands that I have tried. And it has to do with the way that the binder is separating from the filler and the pigment when it's dissolved in water. Because look at this. If you really do like a wet painting with this paint, you get some really awesome textures that you can use to your own advantage. I know that a lot of people will say like, oh, that's crappy paint, it looks like not worth getting or paying money for, but I'm telling you, if you can learn how to use this to your advantage, you will for no money at all be able to have something that looks like granulating paint. I mean, have you ever had this texture here when adding white on top of a layer of wet and wet? No, right? Look at this. Look at this. It's like the paint separate when it's getting oversaturated with water. I have some examples here where I have taken a sheet and then just exposed it with a lot of water, and then I tried to take a pull with another sheet, you know, just on top of it. And look, even on the pole, you can see that the granulating texture, I will call it that, the granulating texture continues. Before I end this, I want to do what's it called? I want to work with this technique at my final painting for this day. But I want to show something else before I do so. When I made this, I was like really like, oh my god, this is like really a new way of painting. But it's done with like totally wet in wet, and it's like soaking with water. Then I tried to paint just a normal painting with it. You know, like you normally would paint with watercolor, where you don't like soak the paper totally. And I was actually able to create a decent painting, even though it was very difficult for me to get like a, I don't know, a nice texture. I couldn't really put my finger on it. And this is how you normally would utilize watercolor. So I thought maybe it was something to do with the way I painted, or I don't know what. So I tried to make the exact same painting, only using Daniel Smith watercolor, because that's a high-end brand, and maybe it's easier to detect the difference when you are switching over to painting the same thing but with a high-end brand. And look, I just have to say, with high-end brand you get a different result. I mean, can you see this technique up here where you with vertical strokes try to make this foggy expression of I don't know how to describe it, but it's a technique to get this look here. I wasn't able to get it that clear with the Artistro, but there is a huge difference in the saturation of the pigments, in how you could layer it up. There's a huge difference. I mean, look at these two grass areas. I mean, you were really able to, with artist grade paint, to get in darker values and make it appear naturally, where it was really tough to get that same dark value in without it was standing out wrong, you know, like like there is some truth in that. The more pans you throw into one drawing, the bigger the risk for it to look artificial or just strange. So this is how far I could push the dark without destroying the harmony of the palette that I used. So I must say that when doing traditional watercolors, I wouldn't use this brand, because I can get a better effect with using a different watercolor. But I will never ever be able to, with my Daniel Smith, to get this yummy, strange texture looking like granulation. It is just, I don't know. I think it's a fun discovery. So let me show you how I get that quality out of this particular Artistro watercolor set. Okay, so I strapped a piece of paper to a chipboard so I can move it around. So let me pick some colors and start putting some pigments on this paper. And while picking colors, are you guys still thinking and pondering about that green and gray shaped ochre? Me too. Oh man, there's a tiny bug in my room. Okay, I hope it leaves me alone. It's a thing, right? I looked it up online. It does exist. There is something called green ochre and gray shaped ochre. It's new to me. So what I learned by buying this box also was that ochre doesn't need necessarily to be yellowish. Okay, One of the things that pondered me a ton the first time I painted with this paint was also when I changed out my dirty water after the painting session. I poured out the water in the sink, and then at the bottom of the water was this layer of pigment, and I don't know, it was just like tiny salt grains of, I call it pigment. And I was just wondering, what the heck? Because I have never seen that before in that consistent. I have, when I've painted with like gouache and other opaque paints, seen that that can be like some residue on the bottom. You know, also if you're painting with like shimmery paints, then the shimmer drops to the bottom of your rinsing jar. But this is different. It was just different. So it just makes me more convinced that this is a chemical produced paint. I think it's made out of ink, added some sort of a filler, and then a binder. But the binder separates when it's oversaturated with water, and then the ink lodge onto the filler, so it looks like tiny grains. But don't mistake, it's not grains of pure pigment, it's simply just grains of filler that is colored in the ink that has been in the pans. The reason why I say it like this is because I have noticed how difficult it is to force the colors to mix together in a super wet consistent. Like here, I'm adding yellow next to purple, and it's supposed to give me a mud color. And down here I had some blue, which is supposed to give me a green color when I'm going in with yellow. But look how the yellow soaked into the paper like an ink and then kind of stayed with a yellow hue. You cannot tell that this has been contaminated with purple or blue. There was like no green, no mud. So just the fact that the pigments do not willingly want to mix with another is also, let us call it, a special quality of this palette. But I really like this palette. I love that I got my hands on something that's different, something that's like super inexpensive to buy again. Because as you can see, while I was experimenting getting to know this paint, I almost used up the whole white pan. So I'm definitely going to repurpose this brand one more time, because I want this kind of paint in my collection with this super funny quality to it. And I can see online that they have another set with full pans, also a 48 in a pink metal container with the same sturdy clasp and everything. So I am probably going to get that one the next time that I have to replace this set. Here I'm adding in pigments. Now I'm saturating it. So far it's acting like normal watercolor. But look what happens when you let the pigments soak in the water for just a while. In my theory, what's going on right now is that I am dissolving the binder of the paint, because suddenly it changed consistent. When soaked in water for a while, it starts separating. Now I'm forcing it back and forth on the paper to make the separation more visible for you guys. Can you see in this area here how grains are forming? Can you kind of tell that there are some grains that are shaded in purple sinking into the paper right now, and it's separating from the binder? And now in this state you think, oh, but that's just pretty, and it is. And I want you to think like that, because I don't want you to think that this is a bad thing. It's just a new toy with other qualities that other watercolors in my collection don't have. I just have to learn how to use it to my advantage. Let me show it with the blue. Maybe it's more visible with the blue pigment. Hang on. I'm spraying it. I'm giving it a second to let the binder totally dissolve in the water. And now I think it's dissolved, so I start moving it. Can you see how it's separating? Totally separating. So it comes out like in grains, like corn. Hopefully it's more visible now. Can you see that? You can see it right now because it's like a darker pigment, but all the watercolor pans in this set does this. And the lighter the color, the less visible it is, but it's there. So can you imagine when I discovered this, I started to layer up like a freak. I started to mix in and layer up. And then I took this lavender because it looks so true to what it swatches out as. So it must contain a lot of white. And then I dropped it in. And I think the pans that contains white are a little bit more opaque. So in a way it just looks funny when they're layering on top of each other. Let it just dissolve for half a minute. Okay, now I'm gonna start moving it. What happens is that it's dissolving in water, and then there is a weight difference between the water and the, let's call it pigment, okay? The grains of pigment. So the grains of pigment will naturally, after being separated, seek down in clusters and soak into the values of the paper, if your paper got a texture. And this is just hot pressed watercolor paper. Imagine if I took like a cold press, then it would be like a more textured watercolor paper. But for the sake of this demonstration, I chose not to take a very textured cold press watercolor paper, because then you would be in doubt whether it was the texture of the paper that enhanced this quality. So on this hot press smooth watercolor paper, when it behaves like this, then just picture how it acts up on a textured surface. So this is the best way I can demonstrate how it layers up and acts like granulation. But the trick is to apply it in a very watery consistent, let it just dissolve, and then start moving it around. Now I'm going to add in a yellow. And normally you would get, if this was like, I'm gonna say real pigment. Oh man, I hope that I'm not. I may say a lot of wrong things because I don't know squat about watercolor when it comes to it. But normally when you layer in a yellow, it will turn muddy, because I got like pink and what's it called? Purple hues here, or it will turn green because I got blue here. So let me just plant the yellow right here in the middle of the one side lavender, other side blue, and then put some water on it. And keep in mind that if this was like a different brand, it will automatically mix on the paper into different colors. Can you see how this kind of refuse to interact with either the blue or the purple? So then I try to force it, and it's very like unwillingly want to change to a different color. Now it disappeared because it was such a small application. Let me go in thick then. But look how you can still see the yellow that first hit the paper, like the yellow ink from the paint managed to tint the paper when it first hit. It reminds me a little bit about the chemical reaction that Pebeo watercolors have. I don't personally have tried that brand, but I've never seen pigments act like this before when they are exposed to complementary colors. But it's interesting. I think it's interesting. Okay, let's put in some dark, because I'm thinking it would be fun to do like what is it called? Those galaxy. I'm struggling for words today. It would be fun to do galaxy painting with this technique, where you're just having these granulating effects. So give it a second to dissolve. It should be dissolved now, and then we just start moving it around. Look at this, isn't it strange? I tell you, I kid you not, I have never ever had a watercolor palette that was this interesting. And the best part of it is that I even think that it was more expensive to buy for me here in Europe, because it's an American brand, so that there ought to be some sort of import taxes. So people in the US could even purchase this cheaper than what I gave for it. Look at this. To me, it's like faux granulation. It's lovely. It's likable. It's unpredictable. You can actually top layer complementary colors without getting mud. And it's an advantage. I tell you, it's an advantage. If I have done this maneuver right here with different kinds of paint from my stash, I would get, you know, like a muddy page. But then you're thinking like, oh yeah, but Lena, now you only got like cool colors on this sheet. How about dumping in a very warm color and see what happens? So okay, let me take a very warm color and put it on top. I'll place it right here. This is a warm color. So let's see how it behaves. Let's put in a lot, so there's no doubt. Okay. And now I try to start moving it around. Can you see how it's just not mingling? Like it doesn't really want to play with the other colors on the paper. It just want to do its own thing as a top color, not even interacting with the underlaying color. And this piece of paper is soaking wet. So there's no excuse for pigments to not run like a racehorse all over the place. I mean, you know, the biggest runner that I know of is the core paint, and I think that's kind of designed to do that. If I have done this exercise with core paint, I would have like an explosion of pigments traveling from this corner to this corner up here. I wouldn't have pigments that are just staying put like this. And I'm so happy that I experienced buying this set, because I kind of kicked myself after I hit the buy button, thinking like, no, I don't need another inexpensive paint collection just because I like the container of it. But I must say that this is super fun. I know that a lot of people would cringe and wrinkle their nose about like, oh, I can't paint with that, but you can actually. If you don't dissolve it so much in water, you can actually use it as regular watercolor and do like brush lettering or just drawings in your sketchbook. And then if you want to have a more like granulating effect, you can actually just add a ton of water to it and then let it dry. And then when it's completely dry, you can come back and work on top of it, and then you just have a very exciting background. Let's put in some more colors. Just really make this a crazy page. Thinking what's likable, maybe this one. But I can just see how this is interesting. If you collect watercolors, you will agree with me that this is rare. This is rare. And that's actually why I think that it's like a chemical, artificial paint that has less to do with pigment and a very unstable binder that seems to detach itself from the tinted filler grains. And the reason why I'm so convinced that the grains are fillers is because every one of them have the same exact size. So it's like it was like a mass-produced maybe chalk powder that just got soaked into an ink color, and that's why it's carrying on staying that color. But they all have like the same size, the same reaction. So I've tried to work with granular paints from Daniel Smith and from Schminke, and it varies the size of the granulation from pan to pan. But here I can see that it's the exact same size of grain. Okay, now I should stop teasing it around and just put it down on the table. Bring down the camera. Let's just rest on this page. And while I'm talking, hopefully you will be able to see happening in front of your eyes the first settlement of how this paint is going to dry up. And as you can see, the more it settles in, the more granular look you get. Oh man, I really hope that my camera is focusing. Let me see if I can bring it down further. Of course I got like glare. What can I do about the glare? If I move it a bit like this, maybe. Okay, I think that you kind of got the point. So now I will turn off the camera and let this sheet dry by itself, because if I hit it with a heat gun, I think I will disturb the settlement of the, let's call it, pigment. So let's see how it looks when it's totally dried up. Okay, so while we're waiting for it to dry up, I was thinking, why don't I do a similar demonstration with the core paint, since I've been talking so much about the difference between the Artistro and my other watercolors. So this is a set I got from mixing up two sets of core paints. One was the high chroma set and the other one was just the generic 12 you usually see in a watercolor palette. So I wet the page to get this wet surface to show you guys what I mean about traveling colors. Then I think the red magenta is like really the fast runner. So now I'm dropping in core paint on a wet surface. Can you see how it just wants to run and to disperse? Now I try to mist it. Can you see how it, I want to say the word travel, it travels in the direction of the wet, like the wet is transporting the pigment. And you can actually, by tinting the paper, make it run faster. So can you see how it's just spreading out as much as it can? It's having fun. Let's put in like a blue next to it. And let's try and tint it with a lot of water. Is it going to show? Did I pick the wrong colors? I want to show you how they like to mix up on the paper to change to a different color. So let me try something that will change this color, which will be adding in a yellow. But here you can actually see how the blue and the magenta creates a purple, right? So let me put in a yellow up here. And let's spray it and see what we get. Let's try and force some of the blue into it. I don't know if my camera picks it up, but as soon as the blue entered the yellow, it get this greenish hue. You can maybe see it down here in this puddle here. Like it wants to change color into green. Maybe I'm a little bit undersaturating of the blue. So let's put in. I'm barely dipping in my pans compared to how I was like scrubbing out pigments from the Artistro. So I don't think that it's unfair demonstration, because I was like really scrubbing in the Artistro pan to pick up pigment. I can tell that it's changing colors into a greenish tone, but it's more like I don't know, maybe the camera won't pick it up. Can you see how I suddenly got a paint's grayish blue over here in the corner, and I only have applied 3 different colors to this paper. So I'm starting to get like a whole new color here. That did not happen with the Artistro. It just stayed the same color and it didn't like to mingle. Okay, let me just run off some of the water. Let me put in like a warm red so you can see how the warm red will want to mingle with this paper, with what's on this paper. Can you see how it's got no issues trying to go in and play with what's already on the paper, and none of these pigments separate into grains that giving you a sediment as visible as the Artistro did. So now I'm just trying to mix it around just like I did with the Artistro. See how I'm constantly creating new colors. Now I got like a peach in this end, and then I got like a burgundy, light burgundy in this end. So you're constantly like creating new colors, but it doesn't have that grainy look like the Artistro. Same paper, different paint. And I do believe that core is like what I think of pigments, because it behaves like I expect pigments to do, where it's interacting with one another, because the way that it's formulated might be the special binder that they put in the paints that we use, that makes it easier for one paint to mingle with each other. Where it's very clear to me that the Artistro paint is just not mingling at all. I mean, I don't really see anything playful happening on this page compared to what only 3 colors of core managed to do. Oh, I hate that the light is not so, or that, not even the light. I hate that you can't really tell that I got like a greenish turquoise almost going on here. I still got the yellow. I got lavender, magenta, peach. I got a lot of different colors right here. Okay. Darn it, I think that my demonstration sucked big time. So now I'm just laying the paper flat, not holding it up in my hands, because then I can apply a thicker layer of pigment, give it a burst with the spray mister, and then hopefully get a better demonstration. And then I actually managed to pick up an orange instead of a red, so let me correct that by putting the orange down here and then come in with a warm red. And spray it. Now I should have enough liquid on the paper, just like I had when I was playing with the Artistro palette. I'm just gonna see if I can manage to move it around. Yeah, this is pigments. I got the green, yes, I got the green. This is what you would expect from pigments, to get this very smooth mix where the paint itself is constantly creating new colors, want to interact with each other until you end up with a brown mess. But so far I can really manipulate it around because the paper is so wet, you know. And when I lay it flat down, some of the bubbles will disappear. But I'm telling you guys, it's not a bad thing that the Artistro acts the way it does. I mean, we have to just learn how to use it to our advantage. And I haven't yet figured that out. Unless you're painting water and seascapes, where you can really make that separating white look like foam from the waves. But yeah, I swiped on the Artistro paint and got this kind of granulating effect. Now I'm just gonna put this on top of here and see what happens when you put real pigments on top of it. Will it just stay as it is, or will it dissolve with the real pigments? Looks like it's just staying as it is. But I can just picture that the Artistro would be an interesting paint to use on the jelly plate. I can even picture that it would be even crazier on textured paper, or if you mix in a granulation medium. I have no idea how I'm gonna create artwork other than abstract funky backgrounds with it. Look how pretty this is. And keep in mind that it was inexpensive. I mean, I didn't pay a fortune for granulating paints. I simply just took an inexpensive set and turned it into this very interesting look. Okay, this video is turning into a ridiculously long one, and I haven't even painted anything yet. So I think I'm just gonna do an abstract landscape by painting on top of this and totally oversaturate it with pigment, giving it a burst of water, and then hoping that it will come with even more granulating effect. And then of course I'm gonna have a layer with some earth tones, because we haven't really used any of the earth tones yet in this palette. And if we're lucky, the earth tones will look like, I don't know, stone maybe? Well, I didn't really mean to make this stream into such a long experimental stream. I should have prepared something, anything, before I started this session. But it's also fun for you guys to see how I figure out things as I go along, so you can kind of tap along with what my mindset somehow. Okay, and then maybe some blue over here. One of the great things about inexpensive watercolor sets is that you can really be rough to your applications, and if you don't like what you create, it's easier to toss it in the bin because it's not a waste of paint, since the paint wasn't that expensive to begin with. So I think that it makes a person like me just less fearful trying out new things. So most of my crazy things have been done with really strange student grade palettes, and then I tend to not use the good stuff because I forget sometimes that one of the fun things about making paintings happens by accident sometimes. So I end up with a very likable painting, but it's done with, like, I don't know, gelatos or water-soluble crayons from the supermarket. As you know, like something inexpensive. And then when I try to reproduce it, it's always tough to reproduce. If you did something really great, it's tough to reproduce it. Then I find that I can't remember the order that I either applied the paint in or what kind of things that I did first. So I'm kind of glad that this is being recorded, because I don't think that I would remember anything from this stream when it's over. Okay, I can actually see how the metallic paint is reacting differently when I put it down. It really wanna spread out. So I'm dumping in some layers of exactly that. And I think in a minute I am ready to give it a mist of water. And I'm basically just going to layer up until I end with a very funky landscape. And that will be my is it called a submission of today's painting? But oh my god, there is beauty in this. There is a rare form of beauty in this. Can you see what's going on down here? To me, it's freaking yummy texture. Yeah, I definitely should learn how to get the best out of this way of using this paint. It's good and bad that it's so soaked into water. Bad thing is that it's like take eons to dry up, and when you have to run off the water from the paper to speed up the drying process, you are actually running off all that graining, could we call it like granular grains that are creating the textures that you like. I want to put in more of the shimmery paint to see how it behaves. Okay, let this dry and see what we end up with. Okay, so I managed to paint myself an abstract of a tree standing in some sort of a hill, and now I'm just gonna let it dry and see how it dries up. I hope that the color saturations stay at least a little bit vibrant. I know it's gonna dry down in a less vibrant manner, but let's see what happens. So it dried up, and I know it looks very grainy. It's got this funky texture. Whether you like it or not, that's a question, right? I like it, and I think I like it because it's a wild, unknown texture for me to play with. And I can see that if I learn how to use this to my advantage, that I can actually get something out of this crazy structure that just appeared effortless. But I think it needs there is a learning curve to how to bring out the best of this quality. So, but it is very likable the way that it dried up, knowing how many layers of different and even complementary colors that I've put on this single sheet alone. I am really amazed how some of the colors are standing out bright right now, because I really threw a lot on this wet sheet. So yeah, fun watercolor palette. I'm sorry this stream ended up being such a marathon. But it's maybe what we have watercolor months for, to experiment and get to know other facets of the medium. So, yep, thanks for today. Hi.